Daniel chapter 3. A gold idol and a blazing furnace. King Nebuchadnezzar made an image of gold, 60 cubits high and 6 cubits wide. He set it up on the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. The king Nebuchadnezzar summoned the satraps, prefects, governors, counselors, treasurers, judges, magistrates, and all the authorities of the provinces to come to the dedication of the image which Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. The satraps, administrators, governors, counselors, treasurers, judges, magistrates, and all the authorities of the provinces assembled for the dedication of the image that the king Nebuchadnezzar had erected. They stood before the image that Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Then the herald loudly proclaimed, "You are commanded, O peoples, nations, and languages, that when you hear the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipes, and all kinds of music, you must fall down to worship the golden image that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. Whoever does not fall down and worship will that same hour be thrown into the midst of a furnace of a blazing fire." Therefore, as soon as all the peoples heard the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, and pipes, and all kinds of music, all the peoples, nations, and languages fell down and worshipped the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. At that time, certain Chaldeans came forward and denounced the Jews. They spoke up and said to King Nebuchadnezzar, "May the king live forever. You, O king, made a decree that everyone who hears the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harps, and pipes, and all kinds of music must fall down and worship the golden image, and that whoever does not fall down and worship will be thrown into the midst of the furnace of the blazing fire. There are certain Jews from whom you appointed over the administration of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Those men pay no heed to you, king. They do not serve your gods, nor will they worship the golden image that you have set up." Furious with rage, Nebuchadnezzar ordered Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to be summoned. When these men were brought before the king, Nebuchadnezzar responded to them, saying, "Is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you don't serve my gods or worship the golden image that I set up? Now, if you are ready at the moment you hear the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harps, and pipes, and all kinds of music, you must fall down and worship the image that I have created, that I have made. But if you do not worship, you will immediately be thrown into the midst of a furnace of blazing fire. Then what gods will be able to deliver you out of my hand?" Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied to the king, saying, "O Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to answer you concerning this matter. If it is so, our God, whom we serve, is able to save us from the furnace of the blazing fire, and he will deliver us out of your hand, O king. Yet even if he does not, let us be known to you, O king, that we will not serve your gods, nor worship the golden image that you set up." Then Nebuchadnezzar was filled with rage, and the appearance of his face changed toward Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He ordered the furnace to be heated 7 times hotter than it was normally heated, and commanded some of the mighty men of his army to tie up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and to cast them into the furnace of blazing fire. So these men, wearing their robes, tunics, hats, and other clothes, were bound and thrown into the furnace of blazing fire. But the king's order was so urgent, and the furnace so extremely hot, like a raging flame, killed those men who carried up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And these 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell bound into the midst of the furnace of blazing fire. Then King Nebuchadnezzar was astonished and leapt to his feet. He asked his ministers, "Didn't we cast 3 men bound into the middle of the fire?" They replied to the king, "Surely, O king." But he answered, saying, "Look, I see 4 men walking around unbound and unharmed in the midst of the fire, and the 4th has the appearance like a son of the gods." Nebuchadnezzar then approached the door of the furnace of the blazing fire and exclaimed, "Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out and come here." So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came out from the middle of the fire. When the satraps, administrators, governors, and royal ministers gathered around, they saw that the fire had no effect on the bodies of these men. Not a hair on their head was singed, nor were their robes scorched, nor were there smell of fire on them. Nebuchadnezzar exclaimed, "Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has set his angel and delivered his servant who trusted in him. They defiled the king's edict and gave up their lives rather than serve or worship any god except their own God. Therefore, I hereby decree that any people, nation, or language that says anything slanderous against the gods of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego will be torn limb from limb and their house made a pile of rubble, because there is no other gods that is able to deliver in this way. Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. Nebuchadnezzar acknowledges God's kingdom. King Nebuchadnezzar, to all the peoples, nations, and languages who dwell on all the earth, may your peace abound. It seemed good to me to declare the signs and wonders that God the Most High had done for me. How great are his signs, how mighty are his wonders. His kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, his dominion from generation to generation. Daniel chapter 4. I dreamed, chopped down the tree. I, Nebuchadnezzar, was at ease in my house and flourishing in my place. I had a dream, and that frightened me. While in my bed, the images and visages in my mind terrified me. So I issued a decree to bring all the wise men of Babylon before me so that they could make known to me the meanings of the dream. When the magicians, astrologers, Chaldeans, and diviners came in, I recounted the dream to them, but they were unable to make known its interpretation to me. Finally, Daniel, whose name was Belteshazzar, after the name of my God, and in whom the spirit of the holy gods, came in before me, and I told him the dream. I said, Belteshazzar, master of the magicians, I know that the spirit of the holy gods is in you, and that no mystery baffles you. Consider my dream that I have seen it, and tell me its interpretation. These are the visions in my head while I was in my bed. I looked, and behold, there was a tree in the midst of the earth. Its height was enormous. The tree grew large and became strong, and its top reached to heaven. It was visible to the ends of the earth. Its leaves were beautiful, its fruit abundant, and on it food was for all. Beneath it, the beasts of the field and the shades of the birds of the sky lived in its branches, and from it all creatures were fed. I was watching the visions in my mind while on the bed, and behold, a watcher, a holy one, descended from heaven. He called loudly, saying, Chop down the tree and cut off its branches, strip off its leaves and scatter its fruit. Let the beasts flee from it under it, and the birds from its branches. Yet leave a stump with its roots in the earth, its fetters of iron and bronze, and the tender grass of the field. Let him be damp with dew of heaven, and let his portion be with the animals and the grass of the earth. Let his mind be altered from that of a man, and let the animal's mind be given to him, and let 7 periods of time pass over him. This sentence is by the decree of the watchers, this verdict by the command of the holy ones, so that the living may know that the Most High is sovereign over the realm of man, and bestows it to whomever he wishes, and may set over them even the lowliest of men. I, King Nebuchadnezzar, saw this dream. Now you, Belteshazzar, tell me its meaning, for none of the wise men of my kingdom are able to make known to me its interpretation, but you are able, for the spirit of the holy gods is in you. Interpretation: a king eats grass. Then Daniel, whose name is also Belteshazzar, was perplexed for a brief time. His thoughts alarmed him. The king answered and said, Belteshazzar, don't let the dream or interpretation disturb you. But Belteshazzar replied, My lord, may the dream be for those who hate you, and interpretation for your enemies. The tree that you saw grow large and strong, whose top reached up to heaven, that was visible on all the earth, whose leaves were beautiful, and whose fruit was so abundant that there was food for all in it. Beneath the beasts of the field lived in its branches birds of the sky dwell. It is you, O king, for you have grown great and mighty. Your greatness reaches to heaven, and your authority extends to the end of the earth. You, O king, saw a watcher, a holy one, coming down from heaven and saying, Chop down the tree and destroy it. Leave a stump with its roots in the ground, in fetters of iron and bronze, in the grass of the field. Let him be drenched with dew of heaven, and let his portion with the beasts of the field, until 7 time periods pass over him. This is the interpretation, O king. It is the decree of the Most High that has come upon my lord the king. You will be driven away from the people and will dwell on the wild animals. You will feed on grass like oxen and be drenched with the dew of heaven. 7 periods of time will pass over you until you know that the Most High is sovereign over the realm of the mankind and gives it to whomever he wishes. The command to leave the stump of the tree with its roots means that your kingdom will be restored to you as soon as you understand that heaven is sovereign. Therefore, O king, may my counsel be acceptable to you. Renounce your sins through righteousness and your iniquities by showing mercy to the poor. Perhaps your prosperity will be prolonged. Nebuchadnezzar's dream fulfilled. All this happened to King Nebuchadnezzar at the end of 12 months. As he was walking on the roof of the royal palace of Babylon, the king exclaimed, Is this not the great Babylon that I have built as the royal residence by my mighty power and for the glory of my majesty? The words were still in the king's mouth when a voice fell from heaven. King Nebuchadnezzar, it has been decreed to you that your kingdom has been removed from you. You will be driven away from men, and you will live with the beasts of the field. You will feed on grass like an ox, and 7 periods of time will pass over you until you come to know that the Most High is sovereign over this realm of mankind and gives it to whomever he wishes. Immediately the words about Nebuchadnezzar was fulfilled. He was driven away from men and grass like an ox, and his body was drenched with the dew of heaven until his hair had grown like eagle's feathers and nails like bird claws. But at the end of the appointed days, I, Nebuchadnezzar, raised my eyes up to heaven, and my sanity returned to me. So I blessed the Most High, and I praised and honored him who lives forever. For his dominion is everlasting dominion. His kingdom endures from generation to generation. All the inhabitants of the earth are counted as nothing. He does as he wills with the army of heaven and the inhabitants of the earth. No one can hold back his hand or say to him, "What have you done?" At the moment my sanity returned to me, and my majesty and my splendor were restored to me. For the glory of my kingdom, my ministers and nobles sought me out, and I was reestablished over my kingdom. I became even greater than before. Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise, exalt, and honor the King of heaven, because all his works are right and his ways are just. He is able to humble those who walk in pride. Daniel chapter 5, handwriting on the wall. King Belteshazzar held a great feast for 1,000 of his nobles and was drinking wine in front of the 1,000. When Belshazzar tasted the wine, he had issued an order to bring the gold and silver vessels that Nebuchadnezzar, his father, had taken out of the temple in Jerusalem, so that the king and his nobles, his consorts, and his concubines could drink from them. So they brought the gold vessels that were taken out of the temple of the house of God in Jerusalem, and the king and his nobles, consorts, and concubines drank from them. They drank the wine and praised the God who've made the gods made of gold and silver, bronze, iron, wood, and stone. At that very moment, the fingers of a human hand emerged and wrote on the plaster of the wall of the king's palace opposite the lampstand, so the king could see the back of the hand that was writing. The color drained from the king's face. His thoughts alarmed him, his hips gave way, and his knees began knocking together. The king called loudly to summon the astrologers, the Chaldeans, and the diviners. The king said to the wise men of Babylon, "Whoever reads this writing and tells me what it means will be clothed in purple and have a gold chain around his neck and will have authority as the third ruler in the kingdom." Then all the king's wise men came in, but they could not read the inscription or tell the king what it meant. So Belteshazzar became even more terrified, and his face grew pale. His nobles were baffled. The queen, hearing the words of the king and his nobles, entered the banquet hall. The queen spoke out and said, "May the king live forever. Do not let your thoughts frighten you, or your face be so pale." Oh my goodness. "There is a man in your kingdom who has the spirit of the holy gods in him. In the days of your father, he was found to have insight and intelligence and wisdom, like the wisdom of God. So King Nebuchadnezzar, your father, made him chief of magicians, astrologers, Chaldeans, and diviners. This man Daniel, whom the king named Belteshazzar, was found to have extraordinary spirit, known and insight for interpreting dreams, explaining riddles, and solving problems. Now let Daniel be summoned, and he will explain the interpretation." So Daniel was brought before the king, and the king said to Daniel, "Are you Daniel, who is one of the captives of Judah that my father the king brought from Judah? I have heard about you, how a spirit of the gods is in you, and how there has been found in you insight, discernment, and extraordinary wisdom. Just now the wise men and diviners were brought before me to read the worship and to make its meaning known to me, but they are unable to declare its interpretation. However, I have heard about you, and you were able to provide interpretations and to solve problems. Now if you were able to read the writing and explain to me its meaning, you will be clothed in purple and have a gold chain around your neck, and have the authority to rule as the third in the kingdom." Then Daniel answered the king, saying, "You may keep your gifts for yourself and give your rewards to someone else. Nevertheless, I will read the writing to the king and tell him its meaning. Your Majesty, God Most High, gave your father Nebuchadnezzar the kingdom as well as greatness, joy, and splendor, because of the grandeur that he bestows on him. All his peoples, nations, and languages dreaded and feared him. He killed whoever he wanted and spared anyone he wanted. He raised up whomever he wished and humbled anyone he wished. But when his heart became haughty and his spirit hardened with pride, he was deposed from his royal throne and stripped of his glory. He was driven away from among the men, and his mind became like an animal, and his dwelling was with the wild asses. He fed on grass like an ox, and his body was damp with the dew of heaven, until he recognized that God the Most High is sovereign over the realm of mankind, and that he sets up over it whomever he wills. But you, his son Belteshazzar, have not humbled your heart, even though you knew all this. Instead, you have exalted yourself against the Lord of heavens. You have the vessels of his house brought before you, and you and your nobles, your consorts, and your concubines have been drinking wine in them. You have praised gods made of silver and gold, bronze and iron, wood and stone, which cannot see or hear or understand. Yet you did not honor the God who holds his hand in your very breath in all your ways. Therefore the hand was sent from him that wrote this inscription. Now this is the writing that was inscribed: Mene, Mene, Tekel, Upharsin. This is the interpretation of the inscription: Mene. God has numbered the days of your reign and brought into an end. Tekel. You have been weighed in the balances and found wanting. Peres. Your kingdom has been divided and given to the Medes and the Persians. Then at Belteshazzar's command, they clothed David with purple and put a chain of gold around his neck and issued a proclamation about him that he would have the authority as the third ruler in the kingdom. On that very night, Belshazzar of the Chaldeans was slain.